Welcome back, everyone, to Lesser Known Operators and my worst part of the podcast. You get to hear me fumble through another introduction. But let's try again. So, this week we sat down with another Green Beret, Aaron Blaine, about 2 hours on the episode this week. I do apologize for the sound on my end. Going through some growing pains and working with some settings, so I didn't notice that my mic was not working properly, but got it all fixed and it should be ready for episode 6. So enjoy episode 5 and thank you for listening. All right, Aaron, welcome to Lesser Known Operators.
Dude, this is awesome, man. I'm so glad you got this going for yourself.
Yeah, to have something that's mine, I was listening to other people's shows and going, I'd like to have that. I'd like to do that, and just go, I can do it. I can set up my laptop. I can go get a TV and get a computer, a camera, and I can do my own thing. And I can talk to all the people that I want to talk to. So I really appreciate you being here. Thanks, man.
No, man, it's been a while, and always curious about what you're doing and what you're up to. And yeah, I was glad that you reached back out, and we're here on a podcast together. So yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
You, whether it was cognizant or not, you're the reason I am drawn towards the public speaking now because you're putting me in for that TED Talk 6 years ago now.
Wow. Yeah, dude, that worked out great. I mean, I was so glad to be able to give that to someone that could go use it and thrive from it. I heard through the grapevine that that helped support the way you transitioned into a career, and I don't know anything else about that, but I mean, dude, and I watched the TED Talk and you crushed it. Like you absolutely crushed that thing. Like I was like that was to the point, and man, I felt it. So nice work on getting out there. And what'd you have? Like what I give you like 2 weeks to get it together?
I took it in 3 weeks from a five line, nothing, half a sheet of paper
Yeah.
to this 16 and a half minutes, memorized it and drove down there all in 3 weeks. Yeah.
Dude, you were burning. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. That was, it
It's a
was
time
really
sensitive
interesting.
target.
And I go back and listen to it every now and again. I could just hear how angry I was then. And like it was raw getting out and getting the military. Now I'm kind of chill. I'm out. There's nothing I can do about it. Then I was not happy to be out, and I was not happy to be out the way I was. But no, I really
Totally.
appreciate you recommending me for that. That was, as they say, life changing. So
That makes me super happy. I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, can't say enough about it. Really,
And
thanks. But
I relate to the you know, going back and listening to myself speak on a podcast or a YouTube video. My demeanor and kind of my presence was so much more intense. I wasn't relaxed. I was still, I still was fired up. And I think, man, it takes a while to put that fire out. And I'm glad to hear that you're heading that direction too. It's been a journey, from like transition. And you said something that I think I hear almost everyone say. You don't think it's going to be a big deal when you do it. You're like, oh yeah, just getting out. Like I'm gonna go figure it out like I usually do. And then you get out and you're like, holy shit, this is a bit more than I expected.
I've got a lot to say on that. I think we'll circle back. It's something I think about almost constantly. But I guess we'll go back to the beginning. You and I have known each other. We met in 2018, right in the summer.
That's right.
So what at that time you were working for Everyman. Where are you at now, and what are you up to these days?
No, thanks for asking. So yeah, Everyman was a kind of a movement to try to help support men specifically, and my part of it was that I was helping military members specifically in the soft community heal and connect through nature-based experiences. And so, like you said, we went through Yellowstone together. That was kind of the predominance of my my life at that time. Yellowstone Glacier, the just greater Montana ecosystem, California, the East Coast on the Appalachian Trail. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time in nature. And around that time, I had a little boy, and it changed the way I look at the world. And instead of me hiking around in the woods with you guys, I figured I better be home and, with the family and supporting my wife and raising my kids the way I should be. And not to say that if you're traveling and doing other things that you're wrong. It's just that I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't stay away from my kids for that long, or from my kid at the time. And so I went through sort of a rocky journey after that trip. And so I went to work for BBC Studios, National Geographic, the show Life Below Zero, Next Generation. I
Oh,
was
nice.
a safety guide on a film crew that was filming the series Life Below Zero, Next Gen. And so that was a tremendous experience. There's nothing else like it. I think being in the Alaskan bush pretty much by yourself, with a bunch of producers that have never stepped in the woods before, is in some senses more dangerous than being in Afghanistan or Iraq. I mean, everything will kill you. The cold, the water. I mean, it was minus 40 to minus 60 on most days. And we were camping in tents. We were in tents with little Mr. Buddy heaters and some 0-degree sleeping bags. But dude, it woke me up. It woke me up to how intensely cold it can be, and you can actually kind of relax into it. And you have to. Like, I had to keep up snow machines. I had to keep camp up. I had to cook for the entire team, and had to make sure they didn't do anything silly that would get them into a dangerous situation. So, great money, sort of, drastically it wasn't stable. It was like,
Mhm.
hey, you'd come home after 6, 8 weeks and you didn't know when you were going to go back. And so I sort of shifted into trying to create my own business, centered around nature-based experiences. And I did a few trips, but again, I was away from my kids. It didn't work out great. And then I eventually saw a job posting at the Bozeman Hot Springs, which is like a gym facility. We have indoor, outdoor hot springs. They're all natural, and saunas, steam room, and we're kind of like moving in this like hospitality wellness direction. And I'm a director here, and so I deal with multiple different people, departments. Predominantly focus on keeping the place clean, and making sure hospitality is the way it should go. And dude, I have a great team. People have been here, like the other managers on the team have been here for like 10, 12 years. It's a huge family. It's a great community of people. A lot of people come here to heal. A lot of people come here to relax. And so it's a really calm environment. It's one of the first jobs that I haven't had to grind, where it's like I have my projects and I work on them, and I always get them done on time, but I don't have to smash myself every day. And that took me, like, my boss had to slow me down. He's like, Aaron, you're like a Ferrari on a golf course, and you need to like get into your golf cart and cruise around because you're just going too fast. And I think that's a muscle memory. That's stuff that's just like embedded in my soul from
Mhm.
especially the teams and the military, is that you just go and you produce and you go home tired every day. And there's value in that. But I just turned 40 and I got two boys. And so my second job is that I go home and I have to wrangle two boys, get them to bed, read them books, and wrestle with them for a couple hours. And so, yeah, and that's one thing that I'm doing. Another thing is that I'm currently in a cohort called Warrior Rising, and I'm not
Okay.
sure if you've heard of it, but it is a
Mhm.
sort of a paint by numbers entrepreneurship course for veterans. They call veterans vetrepreneurs, and so they put them through this course, and it's been so amazingly helpful. Endless amounts of support, people there that are in your industry trying to help you succeed. And I'm building a box subscription company where monthly there's a curated experience built for dads to do with their kids. And so it's all centered around survival, self-reliance, field craft, starting fires, procuring water, building shelters, first aid, moving and observing and tracking, land navigation, knots and ropes. But each one of the boxes has like a comprehensive setup of, hey, dad, this is like the simple, basic way to show your kid how to like survive in the woods, and it's going to empower them. It improves their behavior. It gets them focused on something, and it's such a game changer for my kids. Like, I do it with my kids, and that's actually how I came up with the idea. My son wanted to do military tasks, and so like every week I would do like a range card in the backyard with like Nerf guns, and then we did a shelter where we built the shelter and slept in it, and then we did all these different things. And I just noticed he was so into it, and I'm like, dude, I would have been really into this when I was a boy. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
let and we have the skills to do it. So I'm like, dude, why not? And so the subscription box industry is such a big industry right now, and it keeps getting bigger. And so this is something that I can do that's like kind of a total encapsulation, like I would say like a culmination of all the stuff I've done with the military, outside of the military, and the nature-based, uh, healing therapy stuff. It all just kind of comes together, and it's something that it's just coming from my soul. It's not
Mhm.
just a job. It's not something that like just sounds cool. Like, I'm really excited about it, and building it has been amazing for my mental health, and just being proactive, having the people to support me and just build this thing out correctly. um really fortunate to get some random financial support to do it too. And so all the stars are just kind of aligning, and I'm not sure I'll ever leave this place because it's been so good to me. But you know who knows where I'll be in a couple years.
Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like you need to leave anytime soon. I mean, if you're in the right
No,
place, you're getting as long as you can deal with the winters, which sounds like you deal with them pretty fine. Uh,
honestly, it keeps the wrong people out, and so the right people stay. And so when it's
yes,
-20 for a month, it tends to send the folks back to where they came from, and keeps this place what it is, you know.
freezing to death is quite the deterrent for some folks.
That's
Uh,
correct.
no, that sounds great, man. I really like that idea because
Thanks.
yeah, it's good for dads and the sons because the dad can seem like he knows what he's doing, but they can learn it together, sort of thing, and be like
Right.
everybody's learning something. No, that's really cool. What's an
Thanks.
example of one of the boxes, like
Yes.
starting a fire? Or
Yeah. So like like you get like an introductory box that has like a backpack and your handbook. I created sort of like a ranger handbook that guides you through all of these experiences that you can actually hold on to. And so I think the big difference, and one thing that I've learned over the past couple months, I'm working with a brand strategist. And if anybody listening hasn't ever done brand strategy and has a business, first of all, it's a huge pain in the ass, and it is extremely helpful. And so, like, going through, you basically have to find your market competitors, direct and indirect. You've got to get on their site and study everything that they're doing, try to figure out what their gaps are and what the holes are in the entire market. And then it helps you basically position yourself differently than everyone else. And so my whole idea morphed through that whole brand strategy to the point now where I'm 5,000% more confident that my product will be successful because there's no one else positioning themselves like I'm going to. And so, this introductory box you get is just got the handbook, it's got the backpack, and I'm going to do this thing that I think is like, it's like the thing that I think will make this really special. And so what it is each box has, my first box is a fire box. You got a water box, modern tools and knives, and the next one's primitive tools. We have moving, wind, observation and tracking animals, land navigation. There's a wild plants and mushroom edible course, cooking in camp, the knot tying. And the cool thing is that each one of those skills that you get which will be in each individual box, you'll earn a patch. And so it's kind of based a little bit like what Boy Scouts is. It's like a
Yeah.
merit badge. And so that backpack will have like little circles that have Velcro on them that like these kids are earning the patches as they go. And so they're always looking at this backpack knowing that they're not there yet, that they got to keep going. And what I think is really cool about my product is that each box has something in it that you can keep and use, in the future. So it's not like hey, it's a toy, you open it, you play with it, you get bored of it, you throw away. Each thing will have a practical item in it that will help you in the future in an actual situation. So like my firebox is like, it's not what you would think. I'm not doing bow drills, I'm not doing anything
Mhm.
fancy. I'm just showing that there's so many redundancies and ways that you can start fires that aren't just a match or a lighter.
Yeah.
And so like steel wool and a battery, a little pill box with cotton balls that put petroleum jelly on, more creative ways to start fires than just because a lot of kids can't even strike a lighter.
Oh, they don't
Um,
smoke cigarettes anymore. Damn kids.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
What's wrong with those
what's
kids?
wrong with these damn kids?
So, another inspiration for this box has been there's a Green Beret who I think would love to be on your podcast. His name was Randy Wurst, and he was a warrant officer in Fifth Group. So he was the recruiting poster for Special Forces back in like the 90s,
Oh,
and he was on a couple like initial invasion into Afghanistan, Iraq, and the guy has just an endless career. I bet he was on 7 or 8 different teams and just had an amazing career. But he has a company called Worst Case Scenario. His last name is
obvious,
Worst, and
obvious.
dude, he comes out here to Montana and he teaches those skills to kids. And that was another like big kind of like aha moment for me, is that my son was just totally like enthralled by Randy. He wanted to listen and learn and try to figure out what Randy had to offer because he was just such an interesting dude. And so like one thing Randy does is he builds these candles that are like in Altoid containers.
Yeah.
And then so what he'll do basically is part of the fun is making the candle, and understand that you can be resourceful and you don't have to go find a candle, like you can just make one. And then using that candle to like slip, like he puts it on a flat rock and slips it underneath a fire, or like a kind of a setup for a fire, some kindling, and holds it and then pulls it out, and then you have that resource. And so, anyways, each one of these boxes has an item that you can use in a practical situation throughout the whole program. So it's more like a curriculum than it is just your, random subscription box that gives you some toys or a knife or whatever. This has like an actual, they built, each skill builds onto itself. Um, yeah, so if that
Ah,
makes sense.
that's I love it. That's so cool. And when you have something that people can go on and look at, send me it. And I'll put it up on the
No,
socials
thanks.
for people to look at. But
Yeah, I'm not there
uh,
yet, but getting there.
so kind of what I'm hearing is that's great. How many years have you been out now from since you ETS?
So I think my official ETS was March of 2021. And
2021.
I was going through the medical board process for several years. I mean, I started it back in like 2018,
Okay.
and I was
Were you
actually
active or guard?
National Ohio National Guard.
Okay.
And so I yeah, it just like, I don't want to sit and like talk bad about an entity, but the Ohio National Guard might be the slowest moving organization when it comes to anything. Like it just, things don't happen like they should. And it was a big reason why I got out. of the military in general, just because, like, dude, I think I like still am owed like 2 or 3 years of language pay because the Ohio Guard just never figured it out
Well,
to
just
just
send
be
Elon a text message, and he'll get
yeah,
that
right.
over to you real quick.
But just silly stuff like that. And so, I spent several years out here just going to National Guard units, doing drills just to kind of stay in, keep my status. But I mean, I got home from a deployment in 2017, and
Hmm.
that was like the deployment that broke me spiritually. It broke me in so many different ways, and in ways that you really wouldn't expect. And so instead
Hmm.
of like it was super kinetic and we were out doing stuff every day, it was the opposite. Like it was so bipolar where like the SOTF commander uh, would make us do, rules of engagement quizzes every Friday just because they changed so drastically. We had an insider threat on the base. We took care of him in the way that we needed to take care of him, and it didn't work out too well for us. And we ended up getting put under investigation. We ended up having a guy on the team that actually leaked this information to higher command. And like there was really two individuals on my ODA that tore the entire ODA from the inside out.
It only takes one.
It only takes one, and there was a ringleader, and it really created a lot of shitty morale and a lot of distrust because no one knew for most of the deployment how it happened. Everybody knew that somebody said something, and
Hmm.
we just couldn't quite figure out what was going on till the end. And the leadership didn't really do anything to intervene where they definitely could have and should have. The leadership didn't support the right people, like the good people, the loyal, like actual Green Berets on the team that were
Yeah.
doing good work. They didn't have their back, or they didn't even seem to like want to. And so, man, I could go through so many different examples, but like we drove everywhere, and most of any other deployment I was on in a combat theater, we took helicopters. That's how we operated. But we did gaffs the entire time. We were up in a particular part of Afghanistan where, we were on a fire base, one way in, one way out of just about everywhere around us. And so, we'd go out and just get blown up and shot at all day long. I'm talking like 2, 3 days in a row of just like continuous firefights. And it was
And for
extreme.
anybody listening at home, that's really stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we went to this place, and I think I can say it, but it's called Zermatt. And it's like one of these areas where like NATO never had, and I don't know if I'm speaking 100% correct here, but it was a really dirty area, and NATO hadn't had control of it for most of the war. And we went down there and we lived on an ANA, Afghan National Army base, and most of the people on that base wanted to kill us, and everyone outside of it did too. And so, yeah, we lived down there for 2 weeks, and it took us, I think it was like a 60 or 70 mile drive, and I think it took us 12 hours to get there. And by the time we got there, all of our Crows systems and all of our guns on top of our trucks were disabled, because it was to the point where we were getting out, drop firing 60 millimeter mortars everywhere just to create some, just to alleviate
Yeah.
these little clusterfucks. And so it took us so long to get down there, and that was only half our team. And then the second half, because we did split teams, we had to listen to their radio traffic, and they got blown up and shot at the entire time going out. So it tended to be this thing that we just did, which is to drive around and just get ambushed. And honestly, when you're in control and you know what you're up against, and you land in a helicopter and you take places over in the night, it's so empowering. It's so less scary. But I'll tell you, when you're just a sitting duck in a vehicle and
And
you
you're
you're
going to get shot at.
you're sitting like this, and yeah, you're in this tiny little machine, well, huge machine, but the insides of these trucks are so constricting, especially when you have all your gear on, and you can't really do anything. And so, that went on for 6 months. Where our team was kind of torn apart, and I was just done. I was just ready to go. And so I tried to get out that spring, and a buddy of mine talked me into doing a med board, and I said, sure, but I can't really do much. Like, I'm taking on full-time work. I'm going to
Yeah.
be out in Montana. And he was like, no, dude, we got you taken care of. So I just kind of, I don't know, just like hodgepodge, jumped around, worked with some other units, eventually retired. And, here I am now. So it's sort of a weird process. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't sexy. I didn't get any kind of like retirement ceremony. And I didn't even get one of those things like what you have in the background there, because my team exploded. Like, we got home, some guys went active duty, other guys got out. A couple people just did random things, and our team just kind of dissolved. And it was really sad how it worked. But
Yeah, I had
yeah, it
some
was one of those.
guards. The guard's a weird place, though,
It
as it
is.
is. I got to work with some North Carolina National Guard at the end of the year last year, and there's no comparison to a regular Army unit.
I would
Um,
say that there's big differences, because I did both, and um, the big difference of National Guard units that are NSF that are really good ones, they have guys that are like attorneys, school teachers, contractors, cowboys, and then you put them all on one team, and it's like a tremendous wealth of knowledge just across the board. And so you have so many experienced actual men that have been doing a job, and now it's like full go. Hey, I'm on a mission. I'm back in SF, even though I'm a electrical engineer on the side. And the skill sets and the maturity to me was, at least on the teams I was on, was far above and beyond what I saw on active duty.
mm,
Now, the thing that sucks about the National Guard is you have to abide and you have to like fulfill, excuse me, all these state requirements, as well as your SOCOM, all your special operations tasks. So, like, for instance, like language, like I had to like I don't even think I got paid to do language school because they didn't have enough money for it. So I just like did it. And so there's a lot of really difficult aspects of being in the Guard and being SF. Um, but like I said, the wealth of knowledge, and then the maturity, and it's not the case on every team. I don't know how much time you actually got to see like team dynamics, but or even like company dynamics, but it's like you have some really awesome teams and you have some completely terrible teams. And
I
that's just,
yeah.
I think that's like every unit that I was in, or every, even the active duty SF units, it is the same way. You have your own subculture within your team, and then your team, your company has its own culture, your unit has its own culture. And so I've worked with some terrible National Guard units, and I've worked with some ones that were just amazing. And so it's kind of just the luck of the draw. And luckily, I got some really good teams. It's just like what we were talking about earlier, though. A couple bad apples can really ruin it for
Just
everyone.
wreck the whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
just you got a bad, especially if you got a bad team sergeant or a bad captain. You guys are going to have a bad day all day, every day, and there's
yep,
no way around it.
yeah. The ship
Uh,
definitely rolls downhill for sure.
yeah, and then you go to, if you're the fucking new guy, then guess who's going to have the worst time? You. But
Oh, absolutely.
um, so that was your last deployment, because we met right after that, and that was kind of the sentiment that I got from you
Hmm.
was you were kind of done.
with the
Yeah.
process. Just, I'm over this. I want to not do this anymore. And it sounds like you're doing pretty great now, but looking back
Yeah.
on that time when you were like, fuck this, I don't want to do this anymore. Do you look back at yourself then and go, I'm glad I'm not that person anymore?
Well, yeah, I think I know what you're asking. I had a lot of anger and a lot of resentment um, towards a lot of people, and then just the whole process in general. And I just lost my wanderlust. I lost my spirit for wanting to be on those teams, just because there was such a drastic difference between like, okay, the deployment before in 2013 in Afghanistan was like your quintessential special forces mission set. We had the commando mission. We were going, and we did as well on this past deployment, but it just wasn't the same. But in 2013, had the commando mission. We had a force ratio of 10-1. We'd go out a lot more than what we did, and we'd always take helicopters. We had control of our battle space, working with professionals every single day. The SOTF commander was a guy named Brad Moses, who was an absolute killer. This guy was he showed up at our fire base one day, and I was confused about the rules of engagement. I mean, I was in my early 20s, and I raised my hand like, I don't understand the rules of engagement. And he goes, "You take care of yourself and your team, and I'll take care of you." And I was like, "Roger that." And so that language makes sense to me. Now the contrast of 2013 being able to have that structure and that support to like having to take tests every Friday for rules of engagement, we're like, dude, this doesn't even make sense. But yeah, that sort of commander was out to like make a statement, and we were part of it, and it was fun. But when it came to being under this very strict, controlled process of having to like check in through every mission every 20 minutes to give a status, it just was exhausting. And I lost that, like, just it wasn't cool anymore for me, and I didn't see it getting any better. um Today, if you ask me, like, dude, I wish I was still in. I miss the hell out of it. I miss the guys. I miss the deployments. I miss so much about it. The accountability, the camaraderie, and just kind of like my experience now is so much different being in this civilian job because I have actual performers and people that are fun to work with, but not everyone's like that. And so when you first get out of the military,
Very few people
you
are
start
like that.
understanding very quickly that the military is so much different in terms of like accountability, work ethic, just like showing up on time is something you just do. And then you get into the civilian world and it's like, dude, it's a clown show, and it's really frustrating. So I miss the hell out of it. I'm healthy enough now, um, where I could be on a team and I would probably love it. But I got two boys that I'm raising, and that's kind of my priority right now. If shit hits the fan and I need to go, I think I'll be called to go ahead and get back into it. But for right now, I like my little life. I like my little bubble here in Montana with my kids, and with everything going on in the world and all the craziness. I think this is a good place to be. Um,
Yeah.
it's not busy. It's not crazy. You can get out in the woods real quick. We camp all summer long, and Montana is just endlessly beautiful. As you know, we went through Yellowstone together. And so, yeah, I'm definitely a different person. I went way far one way spiritually when I got out. I tried a million different things. So, got into Buddhism. I went and did psychedelics down in South America.
Which ones?
Had I did ayahuasca and psilocybin, and I will tell you that experience turned me around 180 degrees. I got to kind of understand what consciousness is. I think I'd been just like running so fast through my life that I hadn't slowed down enough to like be present and know that like you can just chill and relax. And
Yeah.
it slowed me down a bunch. Like, it was a tremendous experience. I went down with heroic hearts. So there were several soft guys, and then there was actually some UFC fighters that went down that joined us. And it was an intense experience with that level of, alpha, you know, uh, intense careers, and then now we're all doing plant medicine in the jungle, and so it was. But my whole point is, I went and tried all these things because I wanted to, like, figure out who am I now and where am I supposed to be. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is that I gained a tremendous relationship with nature, with being outside and being able to fully just, like, appreciate and, like, be impacted by this, like, ridiculous place that we have here. And it's pretty much centered my whole world around being outside, being in nature, and just being grounded to the earth.
There you go.
And knowing that, like, dude, like, I don't have control, but I'm fine. Like, I'm okay. And it's been a wild journey, but I'm really grateful for all the different things I've tried, all the people I've met along the way. I've hung out with people that I never would have imagined being around. I've worked in New York City and LA. I've worked on the very left side of politics and on the very far right. And so I've had this really cool immersion into all these different worlds. And I heard Mike Rowe on a podcast a couple weeks ago. He was on the Rogan podcast, and he was talking about, he did opera, and Rogan was kind of giving him shit about it. He was like, "Really?" He's like, "Opera? You couldn't have chosen anything?" And he's like, "I know it wasn't the coolest thing." But what he said struck me. He said, "It wasn't opera that I appreciated. It's that it showed me an entirely different world that existed that I didn't know about." And that's what I've experienced outside of the military, is a lot of different worlds that people are living in. And it's given me perspective, it's giving me culture, it's given me, just it's kind of blown my mind in a way. Um, but yeah, that's how I feel. And I experience it on a daily basis. Like, I have people that come in here. We have like 2,500 members, and so I talk to people every day, and it's like, oh man, this guy's like, he has a woodworking shop and he's doing these really cool things, or this guy sells honey and he puts bees all over the state of Montana. That's really cool. So just expanding my network and this being open to other people's lives in general has been, yeah, just really phenomenal. And it's going to put me on the path that I'm on now. And being a Green Beret is definitely the most formidable thing I've done in my life, and it made me who I am, and I appreciate the shit out of that. And I met, like, the highest caliber of humans that you'll probably ever deal with and work with, and so being able to stay connected to those guys, and seeing all the cool shit that my old teammates are doing in the civilian world too. It makes you feel old because you're like, oh man, I would have been like a sergeant major by now, but
Yeah,
you know,
maybe not. Maybe
and then you're like,
some.
oh, and then you're seeing kids that are like, were born when you got in, and they're like, senior NCOs now.
So getting back to that. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do. Why go be a Green Beret? Why'd you go do it?
It's a good question. So I always take it back to my childhood. So my dad was my pillar of just everything. He was a very special guy, and he devoted his entire life to me and my brother. And we built forts in the woods. He loved my mom more than anything, and it was just like, when my dad, so he passed when I was 11, and it was shattering to me and my brother. And from that point on, I was looking for a guy that was as good as my dad. And my mom dated guys. I think I hated them all. And I just, And I think really subconsciously, I was looking for a man, to show me how I'm supposed to be a man. And dude, I lacked so much maturity. I did so much stupid shit in my teenage years. And like, I just never had good male role models around me. And so my main focus, I think totally subconsciously, now that I think about it now, I was looking for development as a man. I needed someone to show me how to change a tire. I needed someone to show me how to XYZ. Because all I had an example of was like my mom and my grandma. And so joining the military gave me a mentorship platform of like all these good dudes. And that progressed even more when I got into the idea that I wanted to go into special operations. And so I was initially in the Air Force. I don't know if I ever told you that, but I did 6 years in the Air Force, and then our unit was directly across from the SF unit, and I just kept thinking, why don't I try to go over there and just like try out and see what happens? And so one weekend I signed up to go over there and do like a training team weekend thing. And it was like land navigation, 5 mile run, 12 mile, all your gates that you would do in the Q course. And so I went over there, and I was just kind of a workout machine when I was in my 20s, and I did really well, and they were ready to send me. And so one of the coolest stories I have is that I was in the Air Force. I went over, did this weekend, and the guy on the training team that like led the whole program, this E8, he was like, "Hey man, we're ready to send you like right now." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I went over to the Air Force, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to selection," and they're like, "No, you're not." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Yeah, you got to stick around here for like another year and a half, almost 2 years." And so I went over to the Army, and I'm like, "Hey, can you guys just send me?" Because the Air Force was like, "Why would we pay for you to go to a course that if you succeed, you're going to leave the Air Force? Like, we can't justify that." So anyway, the Army said, "Well, we can't send you because you're not ours." And
Yeah.
so I was in this sort of weird limbo state. And one of the supply guys over at the unit called me, and he's like, "Hey man, I got an idea." He's like, "Why don't you just take leave and just like go down there, like go to selection?" And I
Of
was,
course, the supply guy came up with that because they're the
yeah,
shadiest people
right.
in
And I was
group.
like, "Dude, I don't even know what to do, where to go." And he's like, "Oh no, I got all that under control." He's like, "Come over here. I'll give you a whole packing list of everything you need. I'll tell you where you need to go when you get down to Bragg. And then, I'll tell you what building to go down to." 2007 was the building at Fort Bragg. And sure enough, I go down there with a couple duffel bags, got all my uniform tapes on, and the bus showed up. And I got on it and went out to Camp McCall, and no one knew who I was the entire time I was there. And when I got done, they were like, "Hey man, you got selected, but like, where did you come from?" And when I told them the story, they were like, "You're exactly what we're looking for."
We're going to let some lieutenant colonel sort this out here.
Yeah. So sort of a pain in the ass, because at that point in time, I had to go back to my Air Force unit. I had to give them the paper that said I was selected. They had to sign this conditional release to release me to the Army. They weren't happy about it. And then they were ready to send me to the Q course. And my buddy, Stu, who was in the Q course, he called me and he's like, "Hey, man, there was a guy down here, kind of similar situation than you, but he didn't have an Army MOS. And so they kicked him out of the Q course and made him go get an Army MOS." So I hit a recruiter up and I'm like, "Yeah, do I need to kind of look out for this?" And he's like, "Oh shit, yeah, we missed that." And so I had to go to infantry AIT with a bunch of privates as an E5. And let me tell you, that was a hilarious and terrifying experience. Um, they issued us live ammunition for
Yeah.
an exercise for like a for a FTX.
What year is
And
this?
this is 2010.
Okay. So the war
And
is fully raging.
yeah, and so I'm like kind of like a squad leader, and I've got these privates walking up to me going, "What are the red tips?" And I was like, holy shit. And so I'm like, everybody drop all your gear, all your ammo, unplug all your mags. And like half of us had live ammo to go out on this FTX for AIT. And so I went over, like, took the boxes of ammo and put them up on the Humvee. And the instructors are like, what's wrong, dude? I'm like, you need to look in this box and see what's wrong. And man, they got real friendly with me, and they started buying me books, and like they gave me a gift card to the PX, and they were like, dude, they were like, go take care of yourself. And then I was on to the Q course. Well, I had to go to airborne school and all that, and then on to the Q course. So
People
it was,
do become your friend when you bail them out of a situation where they're going to lose their whole career. Like, not just
yeah,
that, they would have gone to jail.
yeah. So I like to think that was like my most life-saving mission that I ever went on was keeping a bunch of privates from killing themselves.
And
And
getting
so
what? How many drill sergeants were there? They will all have gotten relief for cause, been busted on
probably
private,
four,
kicked out of the military.
probably 4 or 5 of them. And
Yeah.
I graduated and just kind of went about my own business. And yeah, it was an interesting journey. It was totally kind of unconventional
I've never
compared to
heard
most.
anything like that except to go to like to Delta or something like that, where like you've got to take a roundabout way. I've never heard of I'm going to selection on leave from the Air
Yeah.
Force and now I'm going to be in the Army.
So I took I can't remember permissive TDY is what I did.
Yeah.
And I went and did it and came back, and yeah, they were like, holy shit. And so when you mentioned the Delta route, I'll tell you a funny story. So we were in the Q course, and there was this guy who was a complete stud. He was in our language class. He never really talked to anyone that much, and he just kind of knew what to do all the time. And so for people that don't know, there's a place that you go for most of your training, and you've been out there several times. Like you go
Yeah.
there for selection, you go there for like SOPC if you're an 18 X-ray, you go there for your BNOC, there's all these things you go out there for. So we get out there, and it was SUT, and this guy, he goes, "Where's the chow hall at?" And we're all like, what do you mean, where's the chow hall at? Like, how do you not know where the chow hall is out here? And he's like, I've never been out here. And that's when it like hit us. Like, what are you not telling us? So it turns out he was in the unit, had to
Yeah.
come back through the course for leadership. And
What year was this?
2010.
Okay, so in 13, we had a guy show up at SUT, small unit tactics. We're like,
Mm-hmm.
who the fuck are you? He's like, oh, yeah, I got kicked out of my. And then he kind of didn't finish the sentence. And now I got to
Yeah.
hang out here. So same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
and we finally got it out of him that he would have been kicked out of the unit. He had to go like grovel with us lesser civilians.
Well, I think this guy that I'm talking about, he had just gone in so young, he didn't have like any leadership. And so I think he got to a point where they were like, hey, I think they told him you got to either go to Ranger Bat or you got to go to the Q course and then go to group for X amount of years, and then you can come back. And the only thing he ever said to us was, I went to a different selection. And we were like, oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
But he was the kind of guy who he would correct the cadre during SUT. Like, he's like, no, that's not how you do that. And like, he would get up in front of everyone and demonstrate like a correct, like, some sort of movement or
Linear ambush.
a mag change or whatever. And then he would just walk back and like stand in the crowd with us. And we were like, dude, who is this guy? And like, how does he not get yelled at? But, yeah, I remember one time we were in SUT and we went into a clandestine patrol base, and the cadre were like, no one's ever taught you that. And he was like, yeah, they did. And that's what we're doing. And the cadre was just like, okay. And so it was just so interesting having someone there and learning from that was obviously more competent than even the cadre was. So.
Well, and it's interesting to think from the cadre's perspective, right? Because these are not idiots. These guys aren't idiots. They're smart.
Right.
Been in the environment, and they're looking at this kid, and they're thinking of all the scenarios. Like, if I fuck with this guy, somebody that owns this guy might come and fuck with me.
Right.
So it's just like, you know what, kid, whatever.
Just don't say anything. Yeah, it was super interesting, but I loved it, and he was a great guy. We didn't get off to a great start. Him and I got into it during language class, and then like he called me a yard sale, which was hilarious, and I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, dude, that's the best like insult you could ever give anyone. And then, you know, throughout our time through like SUT and SEER, and then into Robin Sage, he ended up being on my Sage team, and we became pretty good friends. He was a great dude. I don't talk to him anymore, but I'm certain that he went on to do some really great things. He was an exceptional operator for sure.
Yeah, do some really great things for his country that nobody will ever know about.
Yeah,
and
he was also a pastor. He was a pastor at one of the churches.
Obviously.
Down there.
I mean,
it's like on your weekends, you just go lead a congregation, and super interesting.
You know, some of those guys can process everything all at once, right? It's like oh, I'm going to go do this. Oh, now I'm going to go halo jump, and right now, hey, I'm going to go to the veteran hospital and donate some time over here. They got to do shit like that. They're always doing stuff. Whereas I can barely schedule people for my show. Yeah.
Well, but we did too. But and I think one point that I'm starting to like think of as we're having this conversation is that like that's not what people do in the civilian world, like at all.
No.
Like that. So it's like people are scared. Like at my job right now, it's like they're scared if any change happens or if you have to do one extra thing. It's like, and not that they're terrible, they're great people, but they just don't have that like flexibility and that adaptability to just be like, okay, cool. Like, let's go jump out of a plane, and now let's go, you know, watch my wife have a baby, and then, you know, shift to something different. But yeah, I miss being around just like high performing people that are like that all the time. I mean, it's a bit intense for sure, you know, and I think it's something that like sometimes can be overdone, but man, being around just competent people that can just like figure shit out is a rarity nowadays.
Yeah, the worst day I ever had in group was better than any day I had in the regular Army. Like bar none. And the people,
100%.
We would have shitheads in SF, but there weren't anything compared to the regular Army, where 90% of the soldiers don't even, you know, they can't have, you know, if you can't have them have a toaster in their room, then I don't know if we can trust these folks. But that's another thing about the regular Army. But
we had when we were in the Q course, we got pulled into formation like one Saturday morning, and they were like, "Hey guys, okay, we're gonna address two things. First, you can't weld in the barracks. There's no welding allowed in the barracks. And second of all, you can't clean deer. Like some guy had like a buck strapped up in his barracks room, and they were just quartering it, and somebody saw some blood and freaked out. And it's like, no, that's what you get in the Q course. You get interesting people that don't give a shit, that are just going to go about their normal lives, and they're going to be who they are. And it was just hilarious, man. I mean, that shit would happen every weekend where there was something weird going on in the barracks.
What was the Q course for you? Was it just this mountain to climb and you just did it, or did you just what was it?
It was a rite of passage for me to prove to myself that I had the ability to do it. It was interesting because I think each one of each little phase was like that for me. I didn't have a lot of confidence before I got in the military. I just didn't. You know, when my dad passed, I think like I just kind of like fell apart when I was a kid. I did a bunch of dumb shit. I got in trouble a lot. I barely made it through high school. And then so like I had to like kind of slowly build myself back up in the military. And the one thing that I was really good at was I was very physical. I was very competent. in PT. I mean, I was running easily a 10-minute 2 mile when I went to selection. And so and I was like 190. I could lift a lot. I could ruck run forever. I was always the first, second, maybe third person back from the rucks. And so the thing that I had that no one could ever take away from me was my physical abilities. And when I was in the Air Force, people started to recognize that, and they're like, "Dude, you should try to go into like a soft unit. You should try to go into like to be a combat controller or a CCT or something." And I thought about it, and pararescue, all that stuff. But what was going on at the time, back in like 2010 at least, they were only taking pipeline students out of basic training for those
Enlistment.
specialty.
Yeah, that's how it is
Yeah,
now.
so there was no crossover. So like there wasn't even an opportunity for me to go through their like indoc to go try out. And so that being said, I was doing all these workouts, and guys from the SF unit across the street used to talk to me all the time. "Hey man, why don't you come over? Like, we've seen you doing PT." And so eventually I got the confidence to do that. But dude, in terms of like tactical, just like general like soldiering skills, I lacked significantly. Um, Now, infantry school taught me nothing about infantry, taught me nothing about patrolling. I think it was largely because of the cadre that were down there. So when I got to the Q course, I had never patrolled. Like I didn't understand the concept of like 7-8 battle drills, the Ranger handbook. Like I had no competence for it. And so luckily, I had a good captain on my team, and he was like, "Hey dude, just be the RTO and like try to learn everything you can." And that was the only way that I was going to learn, is seeing it happen. And so I sort of just like started connecting the dots, and we did so much practice before SUT where we'd go out and 3 or 4 days at a time with our cadre. We had a really good I don't know what you guys called them, but our teams were called IODAs, so they were instructional operational detachment alphas.
The
And
course was different. Even we weren't
yeah,
that far apart in the course, but
it
your
changed a
experience
bunch.
was much different from mine. It was,
Yeah,
we had our phases, and they don't. I don't even think they are the same now.
no,
But there was more hands-on leading up into SUT before I got there, and
sure.
then it was blocked into these phases, and then now they just switch them around in different order. But yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So we had a guy, and he was our cadre for that team, going through the Q course together, and he was trying out for CAG selection. And so that guy was just an exceptional leader. And I didn't hear the same story with all of those teams. Some guys were total pieces of crap. They never showed up. They were like part of biker gangs down in Fayetteville. It was like, they weren't the greatest cadre, but ours was very focused on his career, past special forces. So he was doing all the right things. And, he would just show up for us. And if it weren't for him, I may have not even made it through the course, just because I was so green. I was sort of worse than an X-ray in some ways, because I came from the Air Force where I
Yeah.
sat at a desk. I didn't do a whole lot.
But you
And,
weren't an X-ray. That's the important
but I
thing. You
wasn't.
weren't.
No,
But you weren't
no.
an X-ray. Yeah.
But, I luckily had just the right people around me that saw something in me that allowed them to like teach me and support me through the whole course. I felt super deficient in so many ways, but you know, the course taught me so much about myself, my capabilities. The Bravo course was by far my favorite part of the whole course. I mean, it was like getting to play with Legos for the first time when you were a kid. It just like every part of the Bravo course, the cadre, mortars, just the whole like vibe. You got to shave your head, and like everybody starts working out hard, and you like, dude, you lift 50 cal barrels all day long, and you just get jacked, and you work with guns, and it was just amazing. And our class specifically, I think we had 39 at the beginning, and like that first iteration of, I think it's either foreign or domestic weapons, we lost like almost 3/4 of the class. And so I ended up graduating with 10 Bravos in the course. And so we lost so many dudes to, well, small arms and then mortars. And luckily I really thrived when I think I didn't really thrive in the course until I got to the Bravo course. And then I was like, this is kind of my jam. I scored really high in the mechanical section of the ASVAB, and I'm very hands-on. I love taking things apart, putting them back together, and just weapon systems in general just make me happy. Like just like getting to shoot an old 60 on a random day. We had a really cool thing that happened to us where I'm not even sure if I won't say the name of the organization, but they came, and essentially their job is to go around the world and procure weapons from all over, different countries, and then they bring them back and test them. And so they took like the top, I think, 5 or 10 guys in the class as far as academics, and we got to go out for an entire day and shoot all these wazoo crazy weapons. There was an AK that shot had 2 bolts in it, and it would shoot 2 rounds at the same time. There was the Serbian bullpup 50 cal that we got to shoot. These crazy caliber pistols that they found in Russia, and like, dude, that stuff just like completely lit me up and made me happy. And I think like the Bravo course is probably what like defined me in my career, because I loved every part of it. I felt like, everybody gave the Bravo shit because they were like the dumbest guys, but I would tell you they were the smartest guys. They were the toughest guys. And like, I feel like as a Bravo, you're just like respected on a team because the Bravo course is so much different than the rest of them. But that's where I started kind of like figuring out that I'm good at this. I'm good at this thing. My confidence wasn't the best. And, got through the whole course. Robin Sage was a blast to me, like an absolute blast. Like it felt like, it's so obscure that you get to go like do war in a country it's just a town in North Carolina. Like,
yeah, Robin Sage is hard to describe to people.
It's
like,
so hard to
because
describe.
You describe it in a serious way, and it sounds like you're just messing with people. But
No, there's a full-on, like, full-scale combat operation going on in your county. And, like, at one point, I was behind some, like, Jersey barriers on a bridge, and it was, like, right time, right place. I pop up, and I just let this van have it. With, it's blanks. But it
yeah,
was a flower delivery guy that wasn't part of the scenario. And,
no
like, he
idea what's
completely
going on.
shit his pants. Like, got out of the truck, laid on the ground, and, like, dude, I felt so bad, but it was so funny. But like, yeah, I mean, we would like go do KLEs, the key leader engagements and strip clubs and, all kinds of crazy stuff during that exercise. But it's a very interesting thing. And then not to mention like the Montyard people that work the exercise have been doing it their entire lives. So
They're
you see all
living
these
in
like
Pineland.
you
They
see
just have never left. Yeah.
Vietnamese people that are there have literally been born and raised in this scenario, and it's almost like, holy shit, they're really good at this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
am I in a different country? But anyway, it was a blast. Actually, the last day of Sage was my birthday, and it was like a whole day before we could wait for like the LMTVs to come pick us up. And so there was this pond, and we all went skinny dipping in this pond. And so we're all like naked, just fucking having a good time, fucking just throwing mud at each other. And this woman comes out with this man, and they owned the home. And the guy walks down with a case of Bud Light, and he goes, "Hey guys, I just wanted to give you guys this." He goes, "You made my wife's day. She's been staring at you all day long." Because we were out there just running around naked. Oh my God, it was so
And
funny.
after Sear, it's just like, that's, this is just normal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Who,
yeah.
nobody
You
gives a
don't care.
shit.
Well,
No.
and none of our clothes were wearable because we had been wearing them for however many weeks, and so it was just
Oh,
like, let's just jump in and no homo.
you don't even have to say it at that point. It's just, the clothes were the
Oh, it was
smells
a
of the
blast.
Q course.
Oh, and
So,
we all had beards. We all had beards, and then we had to shave when we got back to McCall. And so we had these tan lines. It was like brown and then white. Everyone had two-tone, like a two-tone, like Chevy 80s truck, you know?
yeah,
But
yeah,
anyway,
but so, yeah, the course was, the course is different to everybody, right? You find your like one spot where you're like, this is it, this is what I want to do, and then it comes time to get your beret, and then you're back down to new guy, and you go to a team. What was that like, coming from passing this extremely hard obstacle, and now you got to go see what group is like? What was that shock like to the system?
yeah, I would say shock is the right word. So it was really interesting. So I go back to 19th group after I graduated the Q course, and there was a volunteer deployment with first group that was up for grabs. And so I think within like a week, I was like, yeah, I'll go. And so got back to Ohio, packed up all my gear, went out to Washington State um, like 8 months before we even deployed. And I did, PMT with them. Um, and the crazy thing is like there's such a disconnect between the National Guard and active duty and the way that like certain active duty units will treat National Guard guys and they kind of look at you like you're a turd. And, I went out there thinking I was probably going to get on a B team and probably just go get some experience in combat. And so went out to first group. We get up to PMT. I was pretty much like a range bitch the entire time I was out there. I didn't think I was going to get on a team, period. It didn't seem like that was even in the cards for any of the National Guard guys. And I got to be really close with one of the company sergeant major, and I was actually working for him at night, just like filling out reports and doing fires and all that stuff. And we just kind of like got to know each other, which was my first real like wake up call to the way you are with people and the relationships that you build will exponentially set you up for success. And so a Bravo from one of the first group teams. Something happened in his family, and I was the first guy up on the list. And so I woke up one morning, I got a phone call. It says, "Hey, do you want to be a Bravo? Do you want to be a junior Bravo on this team in 2nd Battalion?" And I said, "Yeah, let's go." So I'm just like, all right, I'm going to go meet my team, which I don't know if, did you get to do that? Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Yeah, I was on 1335. Yeah,
Right. So I don't know what your experience was like, but it was like
bad. It's bad.
getting to meet your team for the first time is like you're just a fresh cookie dough right out of the course, and you're going to go and get introduced to like all these seasoned Green Berets and intimidating. And so I'm waiting out in the lobby to meet my team sergeant, and this captain walks in to the company headquarters and he looks at me and he goes, "Are you good with babies?" And I was like, "I don't know." And he goes, "Watch my kid for me." And he hands me a baby.
Yeah,
And I'm like, "What am I doing here?" And so I'm holding this baby and my team sergeant comes out to meet me and he's like, "Are you Aaron?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Why are you holding a baby?" And I was like, "Some guy just came in and handed it to me." And he was just like, "Well, that's fucking weird." And so it was just such an interesting, like, yeah, I'm here to meet you. Like, I think he was like, "Why would you have brought your kid to meet your team?" And so anyway, I already got off to a bad start with that weird situation. The captain came back, like I think he had to go take a piss. Came back, grabbed his baby. I get onto the team, and like I'm telling you, so the team that I went on was called the Ranger team, And so almost all of them were.
But this is a first group, so you're on 12 something. So
22.
you're on 1220. So okay. So
Yeah, so
I was in Charlie Company, a second battalion also. So
makes
you're in
sense.
Bravo Company. Yeah.
Yep. And so, I walk into like, a bunch of regiment guys that had already had like multiple combat deployments. Everybody's squared away. And they're like, "Who are you? What are you
Yeah.
doing here?" Like, that's how I got treated for like the first couple weeks I was there, of just like, yeah, we don't give a fuck who you are, what you stand for, what your name is. Like, you're nothing to us. And honestly, I think that was like one of the best things that has ever happened to me. It was so humbling. And so, like, I think it sounds really mean, but I'm so grateful for the way that they treated me, because here's what happened. I feel as if by the time we got to in the country, I had at least proved myself to most of them. And the day that one of the guys brought me in and said, "Come in this room," I sat down in a circle of like most of the team, and the senior Echo goes, "You've been identified as a person that we feel is trustworthy." And I don't think I have ever experienced the feeling of belonging like I did in that moment. And dude, it blew me away. And like from that point on, dude, that team is like my family. You know, even the team sergeant started letting me call him by his first name. He started calling me by my first name, and we didn't always see eye to eye. And I think he always looked at me sort of like a National Guard guy. But like, I learned so much from that team. I got to literally shoot out of the Q course, go on a combat mission, and actually go on combat missions like right when I get there. And so, I was super young in my early 20s. I didn't really, I wasn't like seasoned. And so I was always just like trying to figure it out, trying to find the best guy, trying to like understand things. I wanted to be the guy at certain things. And and yeah, I just got really lucky. I got lucky that I got put on that team. And the interesting thing is I actually fell in love with being on that team, and I loved first group. And when we got back from deployment, I don't know if you know Sergeant Major Navalette. He might have been out there with you, but
Doesn't sound familiar.
that dude went to bat for me, and basically I just wanted to transition over to active duty. I just wanted to go just stay at first group and stay on that team. Well, I tried that, and basically they said, if you want to go active duty, you have to come back through the Q course. You have to go redo language. You have to redo your MOS. You have to do all the gates, all these things. And I was like, that makes
That's
no sense. I just graduated the course like, 9 months ago. And so, I just stayed in the Guard, but I got to experience life on like a third group team, a first group team. Got to go to a lot of cool schools, and I got to kind of like do what I wanted to do. Moved out to Montana like later on in my National Guard career. Fell in love with it out here, and yeah, no regrets whatsoever. But the shock, to answer your question, is that there's nothing that can prepare you for what it's like to go into combat with a special operations team for the first time, and to understand the magnitude of your responsibilities, the fact that like this isn't training anymore. Like, bullets are flying, and it is, I think, like the hyper arousal thing that like they talk about all the time is like a huge thing that's you can't reproduce outside of being in combat. And so I was really addicted to that feeling. And the one thing that happened with me and on that team was I think I was a bit like, I was always kind of just like watching and waiting, and I wasn't real aggressive. I wasn't passive, or I wasn't like I wasn't like a B type guy, but I never really was like that super aggressive type. And like that team, like really kind of pumped that into me. And when it happened, it's like, holy shit, like learning and having permission to be extremely aggressive and having the ability to create a ton of chaos became sort of like a drug, I guess. And it's almost overwhelming talking about it, but that deployment, we were able to do those things. And so that's why it was such a contrast from like 2013 to 2017, where it's like you have to ask permission to load your rounds into your
Yeah.
rifle as you're walking into a village, whereas before you're coming in there. Like we had dudes on our team that would like ride into villages and like punch dudes in the face that had like Taliban tattoos and like set the tone in that village before we ever went in there of like, we're not messing around. So like that level of aggression is something that I'm really grateful for, because it was hard to kind of let go of and it was hard to understand how to wield. But at this point in time, as like a dad and a protector, like I know how to access it. And so it's like
Yeah.
it's giving me this ability or like capability. Like I'm super calm and I'm super peaceful, but like the moment that I know it's time for me to respond, I know that I'm capable of it. But it's shocking. It's shocking to be in a situation where you're like, this isn't training anymore. I have to actually do what I was taught to do. And like the stakes are really fucking high. Like it's like, yeah, you cannot, there is no live fire scenario in training. There is no nothing that can like put you in that spot. And I see why there's a lot of guys that'll like fight, flight, or freeze, because it's such a just a wild experience.
Yeah, it's like everything leading up to that point, right, is supposed to put you in this. You'll get in that situation, and it's okay. It's time to turn on the switch. We're going from 0 to 100 right now, and then you
Yeah.
got to turn it. You got to be able to turn that off, and then you got to be
Hmm.
diplomatic SF guy, and then
Right.
a warfighter SF guy. Where now you got to go to the flagpole. Or you got to do these different things, and the guys have to turn that on and turn that off. But uh, no, I mean, I can't relate. It's the only thing I'll probably never get over is not being able to deploy as a Green Beret with my team.
Yeah.
That's the I don't. I'm okay with it now, but I'll never get over it. And that's
Well,
not something you can recreate, right? Because you can't recreate. I was talking last week or earlier in the week with my buddy. You put that door charge on, and then you step back 12 feet, and you got that plunger in your hand, right? In training, and snipers go on 2, demo goes on 1, and you go through the door, and you're shooting live rounds. You can't
yeah.
recreate shit like that. And I'll always wonder about it. Now, then you said earlier, going back to a team. I'm ready to go back to a team, but if I get hit in the head, I'm fucking useless. So I'm never
Right.
going back to a team. So I know
No.
what you mean there, but it
Well,
is, yeah.
no, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but no, like for you, you have such an interesting story, and like I would never try to tell you how to feel or what to feel, but in some senses, I'm glad that you didn't have to experience it, and then I'll know that it'll just always be a part of your story. But what I really admire about you is that you can take what you did and you're doing something with it right now, right? I think what happened to you would probably crush a lot of folks
Well,
to
it
the
crushed
point where
me.
they would
Fucking
but to
crushed
the point
me.
it did, but not to the point where you don't have a big SF crest sitting behind you right now, or a hat that has your unit on it, and the pride that I sense that you have about the intention you had going in was to do this job. And so like I think it's amazing that you are like infusing your experience and like what you learned in SF for the short amount of time you were there to like keep on doing it in life. Like I said, a lot of people would just move away from it and probably
Yeah.
crumble. But
I
dude,
was
I
a
mean,
bad motherfucker when in group. It doesn't matter. To me, I was a bad motherfucker, and I got out and I let that slip. I let that slip away from me, and now it's back. I'm fucking ready to fight. I'm physically ready. I'm cardio ready. I'm mentally clear. I quit drinking. I'm fucking back, and I'm ready to do this, to talk to people, to work with veterans, to be a tier 1 veteran, right? The fucking operator level of veteran, what you're supposed to be. Not
You're
supposed
tier
to be
one
this.
human, man.
Exactly. And you're not
And
supposed to be this drain on society or like people feel bad for you. No, we're here to contribute. I'm here to be as bad as I was when I was uniform. I want to be this badass now.
I love that, man. I was talking to a buddy of mine. He's now a chief master sergeant, and he was saying how sort of the narrative now with veterans is sort of a victim type narrative where there's a lot of folks out there that they can't like tighten up their bootstraps for life anymore. And it's so good to see veterans, no matter what your experience was in the military, to come out and reinvent yourself and keep being that hard charger that you are. And it's unfortunate that like not everyone has that mindset, but that's what's so like people ask me all the time about special forces, about missions, about this and that. And I'm like, it's all sounds sexy, but like really like the golden thread through the whole situation and experience for me was that like it taught me how to have an unbeatable mindset. It like you hear mindset and it's such a cliche word, but like the intentions of not failing and like being able to be confident that you can get through the absolute worst fucking day, worst fucking month, worst year of your life and just keep on showing up and keep on improving yourself. That doesn't come natural to humans, at least anymore. But I will say that like the course, the experience, the high caliber of people I was around, like encapsulated that attitude and that mindset, which is just like keep getting back up, keep fighting, keep figuring it
Yeah.
out. And dude, I've fell on my face so many times with careers, even out of the Army, where like I just didn't fit in or it just wasn't working out or it wasn't my thing. And dude, I've gotten beat down to where I'm like completely feeling useless and like a piece of shit. And then I'll build myself back up. And like, I mean, I'm 40 now, but I think I'm just now starting to really understand and resonate with that unbeatable mindset of like, I can succeed. I just have to keep fucking trying. I have to keep figuring it out because the game keeps changing and you can
Yeah.
show up as that like top tier human in so many different ways. But
Yeah.
yeah,
You can, I mean, but it can also like tear you apart because getting out, it's a shock to get in, right? And a shock to come into the military and to go to a regular unit for one thing, but then you go to a special operations unit. But the real shock is you think you're this bad motherfucker, and then you're going to get out now. And that's the real shock to the system. And I wrote something here. Well, first off, I heard this influencer the other day, and he was talking about guys getting out, and they did all these badass things in the military, and this is the one that's going to get the best of them, was transitioning out. And I
yeah,
thought about that for a long time, and then I kind of wrote this. It's unfinished, but I'll read it to you. And then it's the individual leaves home on a new adventure. Separated from their previous life, they are given a new one, born into a well-established machine with new rules and new people. This new world has different rules, language, and traditions and locations, completely separate from greater society. This new world slowly becomes their whole world. Unaware or unwilling to accept the fact that their time here is limited, they become a resident, a totally new person that has grown from what was. They have adapted. The military's not part of the world, Earth. It's not, you're completely off in a different stratosphere, right? And
yeah,
then you're born a new person, and you, however long you're there, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, you're not, you may have left the world to get away from it. And now you got to go back. And there's no army to fall back on. There's
No,
none of that thing. You might have ran away from a bad situation in your life to get into the Army, and now it's over.
you're
And you got to
back in
deal
your
with
bad
that.
situation.
You're back in your bad situation, or you're back to your 18-year-old self having to deal with that. I think that's just so short-sighted to go, oh, this, there guys go 20 years being a Green Beret, but they ran away from a bad situation at home and never dealt with it. And now they got to get out and deal with it. That's fucking trauma right there, right?
That's the hardest part. And I think what happened to me specifically is when I got out of the Army, I didn't just transition out of the Army. Like the cheetah that had been chasing me of like my whole life's trauma caught up with me. And like I started understanding where I was lacking in development, where I was maybe not being the greatest person. I wanted to understand myself better, become more self-aware. Um, there was so many things I hadn't dealt with, like you said, like prior to the military, that I just kind of pushed away. I went off to this other land and did this thing, and it was so much different than anything I'd ever experienced. But like you said, then you get put back in it. And then when you're in it, you're forced to reckon with it. You're forced to, to confront all these ideas, confront childhood stuff. It all just seemed for me to come at one time. And I think there was like a drive for me to progress myself and understand these things so I could get through them. And so that's why I started experimenting with different religions and spirituality, like Buddhism, and then plant medicine. And I would say all those things were great, but really what happened was I tried a million different things, and there was no real one big thing, except for the one real big thing was I like came back around to finding myself again,
Mm-hmm.
like who I actually am inside, and like the inside matches the outside now. I think
Yeah.
I wore a mask for most of my life. I pretended to be something, or I was something and had imposter syndrome, or I was always thinking I still need more development as a Green Beret before I can be respected or whatever. But now it's like, I don't know if it's becoming a dad. I don't know if it's just my age or whatever. But at this point in my life, I can go, all right, like I really do know who the fuck I am. And I don't know if I would have ever discovered that if I wouldn't have gone on this like journey. Because like what I hear you talking about when you wrote that is like the hero's journey. Like you start, with life, and you go and you do this amazing thing, and you come right back to where you are. And I think what you're supposed to do is share your gifts. You share what you experience that's going to support your community or your people or your family, and your career is this like full circle situation that I think a lot of veterans get stuck at the transition. They get stuck
Oh
at the
yeah.
transition. They don't know how to reinvent themselves. Um, for me, it's ironic, but like I would just listen to podcasts, and I knew there was something missing in my life. I was just like, okay, I'm out of the military. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to be doing? And I drove beer for a while in Montana. And just I would all day long just drive and deliver beer, and I would listen to podcasts. And I got so much inspiration out of listening to podcasts. I think there was one like Jordan Peterson podcast, and he talked about like finding your purpose, and he talked about even transitioning veterans. And I'm like, oh shit, yeah, that speaks to me. And then there was a guy on Rogan, and he said something that really impacted me. Um, he basically said, "You don't have any idea what you're supposed to be doing right now, and you shouldn't have an idea because you haven't heard it yet. Like you
Yeah.
haven't seen it yet." So his advice was just to pay attention, and then when something really lights you up and something like draws you in, it's like go do that. And that's honestly how I got connected to Dan Doty, because he was on Rogan. I heard him say that. I reached out to him on Facebook Messenger, and I thought, I'll just tell this guy it was great to hear what he had to say. He happened to live 4 miles from me, And then the next thing you know, he answers me on Messenger. The next Thursday, we're having breakfast. And then 6 months after that, I, basically co-founded a company, or I was the director of ops for the company that he built. And it's because I was just open to listening and trying to understand, like, what is it that like really makes me feel the same way or similar that I did to the Q course and special forces. I want to feel that inspired to go do something and to be able to help people and support people, especially guys transitioning. I didn't quite know exactly what I had to offer, but I know that the wilderness does have something. And so just getting guys into Yellowstone, just that alone was so fulfilling for me to see. Like seeing you and Tony and, people smiling and like fly fishing together. And it's like that to me was what I was looking for, was to
Yeah.
see what I saw in you guys on that trip. And but I would have had no idea that I was doing that. Like if you would have told me I was like helping guys cope with trauma, PTSD, transition, I would have told you you're crazy. And there was a point in time in my career where I didn't believe that that was even a real thing. I thought PTSD was fake. I thought that like PTSD, like that was our whole
Yeah.
thing on our teams of like, how do you have PTSD? Like, what is this thing people keep talking about? And then
The
something
team,
fucking
just to
get
break in there, the team life in itself is very toxic on your mental health because it's the bro part of your brain is what comes out of your mouth, not the
oh yeah,
fucking intelligent Green Beret side.
not the truth.
It's just the bro side of going, shut the fuck up. And it's the opposite of what you would think a bunch of very smart individuals would come up with in this
I
room.
think you kind of have to. I think you kind of have to push it all to the side and like, yeah, that bro. I never heard it put that way, but you're speaking from the bro brain the whole
You
time.
are.
What's that?
You are.
Yeah, and like the crazy thing is like, the one thing I had to get over big time, and I still have to work on it, is my criticality for others and my criticality of myself. And I learned that behavior in the special forces, and I think that has a huge place on the teams because that's what holds people accountable. You don't want to be the guy that someone says is a piece of shit in a team room, right? And so like you hear it a lot. Like there's a lot of pieces of shit, And so it's
Yeah.
like the last thing you want to do is be that guy. However, that seemed to kind of like build up in me, and even outside of the military, I was very underdeveloped in listening and being compassionate to people at first. And then once I started understanding that, man, my ceiling for trauma is right here, and I experienced this, and this, but the same ceiling might exist for a guy who's like dad yelled at him when he was a kid. And it's like, I can't judge your trauma based on your experiences. We all have different ways we get to our ceiling,
Have you ever
but
heard the
it took
phrase,
me a
the
while.
worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you?
Yeah,
Yeah. And so somebody else's worst thing is also the worst thing that's ever happened to them. And
exactly.
their problems are still real to them. It's the same as yours are to you. But I think,
100%.
when we're in the uniform, we got that tab on, we're not, first job is to be ready to go kill people, right?
Yeah.
And that's a fucking stressful first tab on the docket, right? And you can push a lot of your people skills to the side and your empathy for life, just in general for life, away when that is the first thing on the ticket. And the second one is to not get killed. So, when you're transitioning out, you got to relearn that where you can't speak with people the same way.
No, I mean, I remember being at dinner parties and telling really intense stories and then looking around at people's faces and being like, and then my wife going like, I don't know if I would have said that in front of these people. And I like my brain didn't even like, there was no awareness of detection that this was not an appropriate story
Yeah.
to tell at a dinner party. I'm just like, dude, that's a day in my life. And like, if you're not ready to hear that, then like, don't thank me for my service then. That was kind of my attitude.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to serve it, but yeah, there's so many different personalities and stuff, and the way you mesh on things. But so how was that like? Did you want to get out, or did you just feel like you were done?
So I don't like to play any kind of like the victim narrative at all. However, I did experience, I think, way more head trauma than what I
Everybody
even
everybody
understood.
did, because nobody believed it was real for years and years and
No.
years. And then
And
they go, oh yeah, well, I used to play football, or I played soccer, got kicked in the head or whatever. They go, oh well, you're getting symptoms of CTE and you're only 30 years old. So
this is what happened. So airborne school, before I went the Q course, my last jump, I went feet to head on a hardball road. And I woke up, or came to, and I remember thinking, I know I jumped out of an airplane, but I don't really know why. And I don't really know what I'm supposed to do now. And it was like the world was moving in slow motion. I get back to like the shoot shakeout, and there was like the FRG had like popcorn and hot dogs and drinks. And I go, oh, I know, I'm at a high school football game. And then I looked over at this guy, and he saw that my pupils were just like, my eyes were all fucked up. So ended up going to the med shed, ended up going to a local hospital. I cracked a tooth and basically gave myself a pretty decent concussion. And so, that was number one. And then, I think they say you can shoot like 6 or 7 Carl Gustav rounds in a mission. Dude, there were times where I bet you I shot 25, 30, maybe more. We got so many different experiences where I know my head took a hit. And it was to the point where, like, I told you how much of a physical stud I was before I went into the Q course. Well, by the time I like started getting almost through the Q course, dude, I started experiencing really bad brain fog. I started experiencing like inflammation in my entire body. Um, but I was also drinking heavily too. So like that on top of the
yeah,
like head trauma, like by the time it was like 2016, 2017 in Afghanistan, I couldn't run on a treadmill for more than like a minute before my body felt like it was going to fall apart. And I just kept thinking, have I broke myself down this much
you
this
hit that
quickly?
threshold.
And I just like, I couldn't hang. I knew there was something seriously wrong. And dude, even for years after I got out, I was just an absolute fucking train wreck, mentally, spiritually, physically. Um, I couldn't hold a job for shit. I couldn't hold a relationship. Um, it was really bad. And I think one of the biggest reasons was that my hormones were so completely, disrupted by this head trauma. And so I ended up having a first group guy come out to my house in Big Fork, Montana. And he kind of like was just watching me like Green Berets do, like just assessing me for a few days. And I came home one day from like a workout or doing something outside, and he was in the living room with my wife, and they basically had an intervention. And I care about this individual and respected him. So he looked at me straight in the eye and was like, dude, I see the way you react. I see the way you respond. Your nervous system's a wreck. You're like completely reactive towards your family. He's like, we need to get you on a protocol for supplements.
I'll just reiterate what I was saying, which was, the head trauma stuff and not understanding it, coming out and just sort of like your initial question was like, did I want to get out or did I have to get out? And it's the second one. I had to get out. I had reached a point, I think physically and mentally, where I just didn't have the capacity to deal with whatever I was dealing with, whether it be head trauma, regular trauma, life in general. And the easy way out was that operations weren't the same in 2016 or 2017 that they were in the early part of the war. And so it just seemed to me like things were going downhill. I saw guys graduating the Q course that were absolute turds coming onto the teams. Like, I don't know, man. I hate to be that old guy that's like, hey, my generation was the best. But like when I was on the training team for SF, we parked in the back of the parking lot. We never went into team rooms. We never talked to team guys because you just had this like level of respect that was like,
Yeah.
even when you get on a team, like you're the new guy, you're fucking nothing. Dude, we had so many guys graduating the course coming in with so much entitlement. Dude, guys would just walk in my team room, and grab a beer out of the fridge, and I hadn't even met him before. And it's like, I became kind of that crotchety, grumpy, E7 that was just angry at the way things were going. The culture had seemed to change quite a bit. And I don't know why. And maybe it was just like a bad batch, or, a
No,
bump
I
in the
don't think it was
road.
just a
But
bad batch. I talked to some Robin Sage cadre not too long ago, and this was disturbing to me. He had indicated that he was starting to get the feeling that X-rays were coming in just to get street cred of an SF guy and then dip out. 3 years, I get my
yeah.
beret, I dip out, and I get it from my later career. I got to do that.
Well, what the X-ray program originally stood for was like New York City firefighters and cops and mechanics and guys that were like in their mid 20s to early 30s that were like, dude, like after 9/11, they were just like, let's fucking go. And they got on the
Yeah.
teams and they were capable humans. And then I think, I don't know, at some point between, the first part of the war, the GWAT, and like somewhere around 2010 or 12, is like that started shifting and changing, and it just didn't seem like the course was producing that like mentality of X-rays. I think like there was like 70 of them that made it through selection with me, and I think only one of them ended up through the whole course. I mean, they were wildly like immature.
Yeah, I've said it before on the show that nobody likes X-rays except for X-rays. Now, if you talk to command and listen to some of their interviews on podcasts, X-rays are the greatest thing to ever happen to special forces.
They're yes mans by the time they get to the team.
I don't know, whatever. There's a lot of good friends that were, and I'm not one to speak because my time was very short, so I have a small sample area. But the shitheads in either side of things. But I think, it's too bad. I look at the way the Army does it with civilian to Green Beret, and I think about the Air Force, right?
Yeah.
There is no chance of you going special operations if you're already in the Air Force.
Yeah. That's what happened to me.
And so you're going civilian to, and the Air Force has, smarter people working there and they've got it figured out. But I don't put too much thought into it. I go, are they getting a bunch of shitheads too? Or, I don't know. Maybe not.
There's some that just give the others bad names though. Like the one that did make it through the course, that he was super solid, and that dude was like a combat photographer for like Time magazine or something like that. And so like he had already actually kind of been to combat, and he was just older, more mature, and he just kind of understood the game a lot better. But yeah, it's hit or miss. I don't ever want to be the guy that says like, hey, I was like had to walk uphill both ways to school, and you didn't, and that type of thing. But it is different. And like I was talking to my buddy in Ranger Bat, he just came from 175, and he was like, dude, he's like, CQB is like fucking like medieval sword fighting now. Like, he's like, they don't even do it. And he's like, and then here in the next 10 years, we're going to have drone like soldiers going in doing CQB, and like nerds in like Nellis Air Force Base, like on a tablet, fighting wars. And I'm just like, holy shit, man. It's like, we are the last group of like physical on the ground war fighters that might ever exist. I don't know. Maybe that's a bold statement, but
The power will eventually go out.
yeah,
So
that's right.
we'll see. I'm not going to be unprepared, I guess, for that eventuality. But you said you got a couple more minutes?
Yeah, I'd say we should definitely wrap it up, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's good to see you thriving. I'd love to set up a call just to chat and learn more about what you're doing. Yeah.
Try and text me more. I got a few wrap up questions here if you got just
Sure.
a second.
Yeah,
And
of course.
so you said it earlier, but what is your response to thank you for your service?
I think it's a great intention that a lot of people have. My response earlier in the podcast was like, hey, if you're not willing to sit and listen to me tell one story about just a glimpse of my life and the intensity that I was involved in, then like, I don't really need to hear thank you for your service from that person. I think most people mean well. It's become the thing that everybody, it's like the only thing people know how to do. And so I have compassion. I have the mindset that like, they're doing what they can to thank you, and saying thank you for your service probably seems like a big deal to someone, because guess what? There's a lot of people who won't say that. And when I first got out, and it's like you're at a restaurant, someone sees your tattoos or your bracelet, and you get a free dinner, that doesn't feel great. It I wish civilians knew that. I would rather have someone come up and shake my hand and say thank you than to buy me something for free. Now, it's the same type of deal. Their intention was good, but it's like, I don't know, there's something about like this, like, I don't feel entitled to free meals or going to Outback to get a free bloomin' onion on Veterans Day.
Yeah.
And the second part of that is like Happy Veterans Day or Happy Memorial Day. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
That's a tough
happy.
one.
I don't know if it's happy or not, but what else do you say? And so I think it's just confusing. And to really, if to dive deeper into that question, the root of the problem is that our society has not created a rite of passage to basically create a system where soldiers can thrive back in their community. They have to be welcomed back. Like the Native Americans would welcome their warriors back in and have a ceremony and have them around the fire, and they would tell stories, and people in the community, people in the tribe would listen. Now it's like you're either Mark Wahlberg and you live alone on a mountaintop and you are a sniper and you're crazy, or you're a broken little puppy that needs 1,000% support all the time and you're useless. And so that's sort of the spectrum. But I think there's a lot more people understanding now that like veterans are the most capable people on the planet. And so if you can figure out a way to, I think like Warrior Rising says, we give a hand up, not a handout. So they'll present you with all the tools and resources to start a business, but they're not going to give you money just because you're a veteran, and it's so nuanced, man. Cause I've been to like, I mean, you came to my program, which was a handout, but that was something I was trying to do to help you guys transition. I've taken advantage of hunting opportunities here in Montana, and like I have the hat on, Montana Wounded Warriors. And like, here's the thing. There's a ton of veteran nonprofits that are doing great things, but there's a lot of them that don't quite understand what they're dealing with. So what Montana Wounded Warriors does really well is they don't put you on the pedestal. They don't ask you about your military service. They just get you in the field and they get you on animals to hunt, and you have great meals, and then there's a community of people. You network with other folks that are out there hunting. You meet guys from all over the place, and it's a fun community. It's a perfect example of a transitional community that's like a bridge between service and civilian life. And they don't ever talk about it. They don't pry you with questions. You don't get put up on a soapbox. And I've seen people do that to soldiers where it's like, tell us about all these crazy missions that you're on and around the fire, and like treat you as like sort of a toy, like a GI Joe. And it's like,
Yeah, that's so like you can do that to me. That's something I'm good at. But you can't take a normal and throw them up there and say, "Hey, regale us with tales of these things and for show and things like that." So you're going to freeze up, and then they'll get another bad impression of you of what's wrong with this person.
well, and the other part of that question, or another part of that stream of consciousness there, is that I think a lot of guys struggle with their idea of themselves in service. So like there's times where
Imposter syndrome.
well, there's times where I look back and I'm like, man, I could have done a lot better at this, or I could have gone to this school, or I could have like acted differently in this scenario, or I could have stayed in longer, or whatever. And it's like, it's almost like it's shrouded in so much, I think, difficult, nuanced emotions that once you get put on a pedestal, it's like, man, I really don't want to relive that, or I don't want to showcase that, because war and being in the military is not pretty. It's not pretty. It's not, it's not what you see in like a Bronze Star Valor, ceremony for a guy. It is like being in the actual situation, like changing out a firing pin on a weapon system while it's on top of a truck as you're getting shot at, or trying to head space and time a 50 cal because you're not getting it, you're not getting a rhythm right on your crows system while you're having bullets fly over your head, or having a woman bring you a child that you're certain that you killed because you just dropped like 15 60 millimeter mortars into their village. Like, that's the stuff that people don't want to hear, but it's part of the thing. It's dirty, it's gritty, it is what is asked of us. But then, not everyone wants to hear those stories. But it's also not a great thing to put people up on a pedestal and have them relive them if they don't want to. Now, I tell combat stories all the time, mostly ones that are hilarious about me shitting my pants and, all that good stuff.
Self-deprecating.
Yeah. But like, I'm not going to tell everyone about my 50 grenades I had in my backpack, if you know what I'm saying.
That's a whole nother podcast. that's a whole nother podcast there. We can talk about that when we're not recording.
All right. No, and I don't ever want to mention anyone's name. And like I said, before we started, I'm somewhere between the best and the worst SF guy ever. I don't want to come across as like, oh, these are my glory days and I was this and I was that. No, dude, I just got to be a part of something that was such a formidable, tremendous thing for me to go through. And I'm just grateful for it. And even the community here in Bozeman, a lot of special operations guys, we do things together. It's a cool transition of a community. And yeah, dude, I don't regret one bit of it. Even though I didn't get to do everything I wanted, just same as you, it really was a strong pillar of my life that like just stood for so many different things. And so,
once I got the attitude that I raised my right hand twice, I did everything my country asked me to do, and I couldn't have done anything different. And I got out, and that's it. I did everything they would ask of me. Once I figured that out, it was fine. That's fine. My response is always, when people say, I just say, "Oh, it was an honor. Thank you. It was an honor," because it really was. It was, and then that puts it back on them that I'm honored to have done that. So, what's the one characteristic that sets operators apart from conventional forces?
Well, I don't think there's just one. I'll try to sum up one thing. And I think I already touched on it, which is just the mindset. It's just like the resiliency that is involved, that's required for every special operations unit. I don't care how big of a piece of shit you are. You got through, like if you got through a selection of some sort, like dude, you got something in you. You have something there, and to be able to utilize that same drive, that same resiliency in all parts of your life. I think I see more soft guys doing that. I see more top tiered operators reinventing themselves and doing great things in the world, because that's the way we're built. That's the way our brains are built, and that's what was taught to us, through our lineage.
I love it. I mean, yeah, it's just that thing, right? Because everybody passes selection or passes the course in a different way. It's just that thing that fucking makes you do it.
Yeah.
Like for me, the course, the selection was the mountain, right? And the course was the speed bump.
Mm-hmm.
I dumped everything in there, and that was the course. Okay, I'm going to go right through this, and I did. Then I get to the unit, and it was all fucked up. But everybody's different thing. But they all have that little one thing, the fucking mindset of just to drive you through, no matter what. Nothing's going to stop me.
One example of that was when my buddy was in selection. He went down. A guy lost his rifle in the swamp, and he ended up fashioning a bow and arrow that was functioning. And he showed up at his last point, and they were like, "Where's your rifle?" And he's like, "I lost it. However, I built this bow and arrow out of like bamboo sticks and 550 cord." And they were like, "Is it functional?" And he shot one of the arrows into the tree, and they were like, "Okay, you're the guy we're looking for." And it's like, that's the kind of guy that's what sets us apart. And it's
I've
a funny.
I've heard that story. We all, I mean, because you hear they're passed down through
It's all lore,
selection and
yeah.
shit. It's all lore. But I
wonder
have
if
heard
it
that
actually
story.
ever happened. I hope it did, but that's my example, is like the ability to be unconventional, to pivot and just figure it the fuck out is not something that can be taught, for sure.
No. It's like you can't. What do they say in basketball? You can't teach 7 feet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. What's the one moment of your career you wish you could just go back and relive one more time?
Oh, probably that moment in Robin Sage where I'm just swimming in a pond drinking a Bud Light with all my sage,
Just like Shawshank Redemption, right? When you're on the roof, retar on the roof, having some beers with your bros. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that, and all the moments in the team room where you're just laughing hysterically at something, or you're on the range. I mean, and just the people, man. I mean, holy crap, you meet the best of the best. And then you get to watch their lives unfold. And yeah, the camaraderie, you can't find it anywhere else. It's just, it's impossible. And so I miss a lot of things, but being in the team rooms and just like being with your family is like your SF family is you eat, sleep, fight. You do everything with like these small group of guys, and yeah, nothing replaces it.
No, absolutely not. Best piece of advice that you received during your career?
Don't take things personally.
Yeah, because there's a lot of direct statements, right? In group, you get told without any fluff a lot of things. It's business, even more so because it's life or death. So it's just business, kid.
Yeah, it's business. You have to remove that emotional response, and it's not about, just knowing it's not about you. It's about the mission. It's about the guys. It's about everything. It's about whatever you're trying to accomplish means more than one person, And so, yeah, I learned infinitely more in SF than I did in school or growing up. Didn't have those guys around, but then I was just suddenly immersed in just really good dudes.
I didn't know anything till I fucking, got through the Q course. That fuck, Jesus. It's all a culmination. All right, last one. We had a different one, but we replaced it with this one. I like this one more. What were you afraid of then? And what are you afraid of now?
I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of getting dropped out of a course. I was afraid of getting dropped for performance. And so, being able to succeed was a big deal for me. And what I'm afraid of now is watching how fast my kids grow up. And I'm terrified of, it's like, I'm only going to get these, like, it's like I'm very finitely aware that, like, I'm going to get this maybe 10 to 15 year opportunity to raise these boys to be warriors, and also maintain a friendship, maintain a mentorship, maintain a healthy amount of balance as a father to get them ready for this world. The world that we live in now, it is scary to think about my kids going out in it not being prepared.
Yeah. And this is the first time you've been this age too, right?
Yeah.
So we're growing up together.
Humans
trying to
in
make the
progress.
most out of it. Yeah. But that was the thing about the course, right? You're in your 20s, I think, or 20s.
Yeah.
And you don't know anything. And you're going through, you got to learn all this shit and grow up and be responsible for all this other shit and deal with these people. And everybody's just this whirlwind of stress and life. And I don't know, maybe it makes the rest of life, civilian life, maybe that's why it seems so boring. It's because you're just subjected to so much. It moved that threshold for trauma higher and higher. And then you get to civilian world and go, well, this is pretty boring. Yeah.
Well, I've told my wife many times, stressful situations make me feel somewhat relaxed, because I'm like, yeah, I know what I'm going to do right now. Like, this is a mission for me. I'm not just sitting watching the grass grow.
My wife made that comment when stuff will happen, and I just did flat reaction. I was like, no, that's just all right. Now let's assess. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah, that's what people need.
Yeah,
calm people in chaotic situations. So,
yeah, I think the country would be a better place if everybody, at least every male, served 2 years in the military or public service. I think we'd have a much different society. I know it's different societies in the countries I've been to where everybody had to serve. So
it's an interesting thought.
So, well, that's a one for another day. I really appreciate you coming on, Aaron Blaine. What's the name of your box company, or do you have a name yet, or is it still top secret?
Playing around with a bunch of stuff. I'll let you know when it comes out. I'll send you a box, see what you think, and maybe we can do another podcast when that comes out.
Absolutely. I will keep it on there. Hey, Matt, again, I really appreciate you coming on here, and we can catch up. I'll text you more, and we'll stay on there. So, you got anything for me?
No, man. Just proud to know you. Glad you're thriving, and look forward to learning more about what you're up to. So let's get a call on the books.
Appreciate you. Bye, everybody.